Hello and welcome to another episode of Trip 101 Travel Talk series. Today we're traveling to the land of glaciers and lakes. It's Alaska, and I'm very pleased to welcome Katy over here, who's going to share all about her trip. So, a very warm welcome, Katy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for asking us.
So, Katy, before we talk about Alaska, please tell me a little about yourself and your family since you all travel together.
Yeah, so my name's Katy, and our Paradise Falls family is our handle across all of the social media. So we are from the northwest of England. It's myself, my husband Greg, and our children Eva, who's 11, and Finley, who's 9. Yeah, so that's us.
How long have you been traveling together?
So Greg and I have been traveling together since we were 16, and we've always loved to travel, and we were determined that that would continue when we had the children. So one of the things we love showing the children the world, experiencing different cultures, and the main thing that we love now we're a family is just spending quality time together, away from the stresses of everyday life. It's fantastic to be all together and switch off. We have a much better time than we do sat at home.
How many times a year do you travel together?
As much as we can, really. So Greg and I both work full time, so we're limited to the amount of annual leave we get, and we try not to take the children out of school too much. We go on large trips, so trips of kind of a week or more, about 4 a year, and then try and fit weekends in whenever we can as well, because living in England, it's easy to go to Europe just for the weekend, so we've done that in the past as well.
Oh, that's cool. And what about Eva and Finley? Do they like seeing the places and are they excited about seeing more of the world as well?
Yeah, they absolutely love it. They don't enjoy flying, but it's very boring on an aeroplane for a long time. So we try and just get as many snacks and as much loaded up on the iPads to keep it fun as possible. But once they're there, they absolutely love it. So I think probably myself, I prefer cities and exploring cities a little bit more. I think their favourite would be beaches. So things where it's a little bit more relaxing, they've got a little bit more chill time. And as a family, we love visiting Disney and all of the Disney resorts around the world as well. So we try to get a nice balance of all of those things in most of our trips.
That must be quite like a task when you're planning your trips, that keeping yourself entertained and then also keeping the kids entertained.
Definitely, that there's lots of compromise. So we all know that we're not going to do things that we've picked 100% of the time. So it's making sure if we're walking around a city looking at some sights on a morning, then in the afternoon we try and do something more fun for the children, or vice versa. We include as much for everyone as we can in our trips.
So, what about Alaska? How did you decide on going there?
So Alaska has always been an absolute bucket list destination for myself and my husband. So it's just, we've seen pictures like the one behind me. It's beautiful. It's a long way from England, so it was a long flight to get there. So we wanted to wait until the kids were old enough to appreciate it. And when we went in August, the kids were 11 and 8, perfect ages for it.
And how did it live up to your expectations since you were planning to visit for a long time? How did it actually go?
It was everything I hoped it would be and more, which is fantastic when it goes that way. It was just absolutely stunning. Because it's such a long way away, we decided that we would combine it with a road trip to Canada beforehand. So we flew into Calgary, travelled west from Calgary to Vancouver, stopping at a few places on the way before finishing in Vancouver and getting on a cruise up to Alaska. So we had 10 nights traveling around Canada first, and then a week exploring Alaska. And it was just fantastic. I would do it all again.
Now, if I ask you, you have to convince someone to go to Alaska, what will you tell them?
So I think the things that we loved the most, so it was stunning. We were on a cruise, and everywhere the boat went, we were just met with just the most amazing sight. The glaciers, waterfalls, mountains, absolutely stunning. And then when we got off, so at the excursions, the wildlife we saw was fantastic. We wanted to see things like orcas and bears, and Alaska definitely delivered. It was just wonderful. And I think as well, the culture and the locals, every port that we stopped at, we just absolutely loved it. Everybody was friendly. There was so much to do. It was how we imagined Alaska to be, but even better if possible.
That's really great. Yeah. Why did you decide to take the cruise? I know Alaska is a difficult destination. Mostly people choose the cruise. What was your reason for doing that?
So I mentioned earlier, we absolutely love Disney. So we are actually Disney Vacation Club members and we've been to various resorts and we've got a little bit hooked on is Disney Cruise Line. So we think it's the talking about making sure a trip works for everybody in the family. Disney Cruise Line ticks so many of those boxes. There's so much to do on the ship, but at the same time, it moves to different places every day almost. So we get off, explore different cities, explore different places, and then back on board for Disney and chill time that the kids want in the pool and things like that. So when we were looking at Alaska, it was always going to be a Disney cruise. It was just a case of when with the kids. I think Alaska is a vast place. It's absolutely huge, and trying to the cruise only goes to quite a small corner of Alaska. We would love to go back and explore a little bit more for longer, but it was an easy way to not have to fly to different places, to not have to spend a lot of time in the car going to the different places, but still seeing all of those major cities of Alaska, really. So yeah, the cruise worked perfectly. And I think, like you say, I think a lot of people cruise Alaska. There's lots of different cruise lines, but it was perfect. And obviously when you're on the boat as well, when you're on the ship, the scenery is just absolutely stunning. So even when you're on the ship itself, you're going past the most gorgeous mountains, glaciers, waterfalls. You feel like you're really immersed in Alaska, even when you're not at the ports.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Because yeah, navigating Alaska on your own can be a bit daunting for sure. I won't say challenging because
Yeah.
for someone who's a pro at traveling, I guess it's a destination that would challenge them and encourage them. But it
Yeah,
is a little bit like tricky terrain.
yeah, it is. And it's very spread out. A lot of Alaska is quite bare. The population of such a vast place isn't large. There would be a lot of time just driving with nothing around. It would be like traveling on a ghost road and you wouldn't see many things until you hit the next city as well. So yeah, I think it would have took a long time to explore ourselves not on the cruise. If people can make that work, that would be wonderful as well.
So you went in August of this year, about 7 days. That's what the extent of the cruise was.
Yes, that's right.
And how was the weather like while you were there? Was it pleasant? And did it check the boxes?
Yeah, so we didn't have much clue what to expect in the weather. So I think it can be really changeable. So we've done destinations like Iceland in the past and Lapland that are absolutely freezing. So we were all in snowsuits. But Alaska in the summer, we were like, we don't know if it's going to be freezing cold necessarily. We don't know if it's going to be warm. And we're really lucky with the weather. The weather in general was great. We had one day on board. So where you don't get off the ship and it's called Glacier Day. You go through different fjords and see the glacier at the end. We went to Dawes Glacier and the weather was perfect, sunny, no rain, really warm. So the kids spent a lot of the day in the swimming pool. And the port days, it was a little bit wet. Some days it rained a little bit. It was never too cold, so we just made sure we took lots of different layers. So we had raincoats and things like that. But we thought August was a perfect time to visit.
And were you able to see the coveted Northern Lights also at this time?
We were so lucky with this. We've had so many different trips to try and properly spot the Northern Lights. We were lucky enough to see them in the past in Lapland, but although we could see them on photos, you couldn't see much with the naked eye. It was similar on this trip. There was a Facebook group for people on the cruise, and everybody agreed that we'd set up a WhatsApp group. And if anybody saw any wildlife, so if anybody saw any orcas or bears or the Northern Lights, they would send a message around, and that was exactly what worked for us. So one evening we were just about to go to sleep. It was about 11 o'clock. Somebody texts saying, if you go outside now, you will see the Northern Lights. Off we went. We ran to the back of the ship and we were so lucky. So it was one of those where you couldn't see a lot with your naked eye again, but on photos they were there and you could see them dancing around in the mist. So we were lucky to see the Northern Lights.
That's so cool. I think people are hesitant to go in summer. They want to go in deep winter to see them. So if you
Exactly
went
that.
in August, that's pretty cool.
It
Best of
definitely
both.
was. So lots of people said to us, "Oh, I don't think you'll see them in August. The chances are low," but we were in the middle of August and still managed to see them. So don't let that put you off a summer trip as well.
Yeah. You said that you started in Vancouver. That's where you boarded the cruise ship from.
Yes.
Okay. How did it pan out? What were you able to do on the ship in the 7 days you were there?
Yeah, we had three different port stops. So I'll go through in order. That's probably the easiest thing to do. So
Okay.
we boarded on at Vancouver, had a wonderful afternoon sailing out of Vancouver under the Lionsgate Bridge past Stanley Park. So that was wonderful to see the city from that different perspective as well. Our first day was at sea to get up to Alaska. The second day was what's called the Glacier Day, where we didn't get off the ship, but you go very close to Dawes Glacier. So that felt like a day in Alaska to us. The next day, we went to Icy Strait Point, which was one of the stops on the cruise. We did a whale watching excursion and we saw humpback whales. We didn't see any orcas on this trip, but we were lucky enough to spot orcas from the cruise ship the day before. So, like I said, it ticked so many boxes with the wildlife we were hoping to see. And then my husband, Greg, he actually did an excursion by himself to go and see bears as well. And he loved that. And then after that, we stopped at Juneau. So we did an excursion where it was basically just transport and it went out to Mendenhall Glacier. We got dropped off at the visitor centre and did a hike to the waterfall, which was wonderful. I think it's called Nugget Falls. You could see the waterfall and glacier. We spent time in the town of Juneau that afternoon, which was wonderful. Felt like we were immersed in the culture, saw all of the totem poles, which were wonderful. Then we went to a port called Ketchikan, which was wonderful. We saw a lumberjack show there. We were trying to tick off some of the really traditional things you'd expect from Alaska whilst exploring the ports themselves. So we did the lumberjack show in the morning and explored the town in the afternoon.
That's pretty cool. Each day you were allowed to get off the cruise ship. Did you book your tour separately, or was this something that also the cruise organized for you as well?
Yeah, so I think all of the ones we did on this cruise, we booked through Disney Cruise Line. So we did book with the cruise itself. But there's lots of options almost. So most port days were long. So we docked around kind of 7 in the morning, didn't have to get back on again until around 7 in the evening. You had a really long time. You weren't limited in terms of rushing to make sure you were back to board the ship on time. We did book all of them through Disney. Most of the port you would have been able to get off and book some yourself. You could pre-book using different options or get off and do it yourself. We just booked it through Disney just for kind of ease, really, because we'd not been to Alaska before. It's one of those, the first time we go somewhere, we're more cautious about how we do things just until we get the lay of the land. So yes, we booked all of those through the cruise line itself.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
And how were each of these boat stops and the tours that you were doing? How did they turn out to be?
So we absolutely loved all of them. There was nothing that we would have changed, nothing we didn't enjoy. The whale watching cruise from Icy Strait Point, it's one of those cruises where they say you're guaranteed to see some whales or get your money back. So they knew what they were doing. So we saw sea lions, otters, or humpback whales, which was wonderful. My husband Greg, he absolutely loved the bear excursion that he did. So we'd spent up to this point, all through our time in Canada, we'd been looking for bears. So we'd spent hours and hours on driving, walking, looking for bears, and we'd never seen any. So at this point, the kids were fed up. They were like, "No, we're not going on another excursion because we're not going to see this bear. It will never happen. We'd rather be in the swimming pool." So Greg went by himself, and of course, that meant he saw loads of bears. So he absolutely loved that. He said it was a wonderful excursion. In Juneau, it was fantastic. So the Mendenhall Glacier was just spectacular. There's lots of different excursions you can do. So you could do helicopter tours onto the glacier. You could do seaplanes. You could hike the actual glacier. So there was lots of different things. We went with the simplest option, which was just walking around it ourselves, much cheaper than helicopter and plane excursions. The lumberjack show was such good fun. So again, didn't really know what to expect, didn't know if it would be a little bit cliche, a little bit cheesy, but it was cheesy, it was cliche, but it was wonderful. It was so much fun. Everybody was really involved in the audience. They encouraged to shout out and cheer, and it was really fun.
A moment ago, you were talking about being able to explore the totem poles as well. So where was that? Was that in Juneau?
Almost all the ports we went to had a lot of, there was things like visitor centre talking about the local culture, and there was like Alaskan tourist centres and things like that. So
Hmm.
Juneau was probably the most that we explored and that we saw and that we went out into them, which was wonderful to see all of the carved totem poles. Almost all of them have a plaque that explains the history of it and how long it's been there and who did it and the meaning behind it, which it was spectacular to see.
Almost all the ports, you would learn
Yes,
about the
so
culture and history.
almost all of them. Ketchikan as well. We spent a lot of time walking around, and there was lots and lots to see there. Icy Strait Point, there was definitely totem poles, but I think Icy Strait Point is more a bit of a man-made port for cruise ships. So I think it's not necessarily a town. I think it's been built around the fact that it's an easy stop and that they've built things like a cable car to go up into the mountains there. I think that's probably there's a bit less there around actual local residents and the culture there. Juneau and Ketchikan were probably the best stops for that.
And what about your experience seeing the whales? Was it your first time spotting them?
It's so again, we've been so lucky with our travel that we've been able to do through the years. So we've done Greg and I, when Eva was a baby, we went to Boston and Cape Cod, went on a whale cruise there and saw some there, which was absolutely fantastic. We had managed to spot them before. The kids couldn't necessarily remember. Eva was obviously very young. Finley wasn't even born. So it was the first time we'd seen them as a family, which
Hmm.
was just wonderful. But I think we'd been spoiled on the cruise itself. So the day before on Glacier Day, we were just surrounded. So when we went onto the top deck, every angle you looked, you could see spouts, whales all around. We'd seen
Oh,
loads the day before, which was absolutely fantastic.
okay. So the tour really didn't add to
Yeah,
the
so
variety that you saw.
yeah, probably. So I think the tour depends on a bit of luck. So when we went, there was big humpback whales, but I think they were asleep, so they didn't move a lot. They looked like floating logs at first, and we were like, "Is that really a whale?" But you could see, so they didn't move a lot on our whale watching boat tour. So yes, I think as well. So I think before we went, we were really hoping that we'd managed to spot an orca in the wild. On board the ship, there was like a local kind of wildlife expert who lived in Alaska, and he gave talks, he gave seminars on board the ship. So we went and he talked about the type of wildlife you could expect to see and how likely it was that you would see it. And whereas humpbacks are kind of resident in these waters, the orcas are transient. So they would be traveling through the waters. You're not guaranteed to see them. It's just if they're passing at the time, which
Hmm.
we didn't see on the whale watching tour, but we did manage to spot some from the cruise ship itself. So yeah, we were over the moon that we managed to
Hmm.
see as well.
When you were at these various spots, how were you navigating? Were you walking around to the various spots, or were you being dropped to the various places that you wanted to see?
So with all of the ports, so we've done quite a few cruises. We've been really lucky. Sometimes the port can be miles away from the town itself, but the Alaska ones were fantastic. We were dropped at Icy Strait Point. It was a 30-second walk into the main kind of visitors hub itself. At
Hmm.
Juneau, I think there's two different port areas. So when we were walking through the town itself, we saw a Royal Caribbean ship in the centre of town, whereas our cruise ship was a little bit further, but there was free bus transfers all day. So we booked an excursion and it was a 5-minute bus ride. You could have walked it anyway. Ketchikan the ship was parked right there. It was a 30-second walk into town. It was very easy to navigate on foot. The towns are quite small. We thought it was a wonderful cruise for being able to explore everything by foot, which is obviously a very easy way to do it.
Yeah. When you were at these various towns, did you have an opportunity to visit any local restaurants or try any food on shore?
Yeah, so we did on at Icy Strait Point. There was some restaurants right there. So there was quite a few different restaurants. There was a cannery. I think there was a local brewery as well. So we stopped for a snack. We could make s'mores as well. So there was campfires there and marshmallow kits. So we did things like that, which again is something you'd expect to see in Ketchikan was probably. So Juneau had a lot of street food. So Juneau in the town centre itself had loads of different food carts, and the people that we'd spoken to on the ship said, "Oh, you've got to try some of the street food." We got a few different snacks there. And then in Ketchikan, we found a wonderful like pancake crepe place. It was like the Great Alaskan Crepe Company, I think it was. So it had loads of different options, sweet or savory. Obviously, salmon and fish is a huge thing over there. So yeah, we were really lucky that we tried a lot of different snacks, but because we were on the cruise and we knew we'd have that food and we'd paid for that as part of our cruise, we tended just to eat a few different snacks when we were out during the day and then have our evening meal back on the ship.
Okay. So that's great. Yeah, you were able to try out some of these local items like the crepe, and that's so nice.
Yeah, it was. It was fab.
Yeah. Among the glaciers and the waterfalls that you were mentioning, which one stood out? Which would you recommend people to definitely be able to spot when they're
So
visiting?
yeah, in Juneau, the Mendenhall Glaciers, we got dropped off at the Glacier Visitor Centre and did a walk. So that was just spectacular. The glacier itself is there. When you get dropped at the visitor centre, there's loads of different walking routes and hikes that you can do. So we did one, I think it might have been called Steep Creek. I'm trying to think. It was a little walking route where you saw all the rivers and the salmon because there was so many salmon around. They were all obviously moving through at this time of year, which was wonderful to see. Then we did the Nugget Falls Trail. It wasn't very long. It was probably like 2 mile round trip, half an hour to get there. And it was to the Nugget Falls waterfall, which was spectacular. You could get so close to the waterfall itself. There was a little beach area. From there, you can see Mendenhall Glacier as well, which was just spectacular.
Did it feel too cold near the glaciers and the falls, or were you able to
It
enjoy it?
It was fine. The closer you got to the waterfall, the wetter you got. It was chilly. But no, we were really lucky. So when we were in Canada before the Alaska part of the trip, so we went to the Columbia ice fields as well as part of trip. So that was where you got to walk onto a glacier. That was chilly. That was very cold. So it was once you got onto the glacier itself, you definitely needed to wrap up warm. So yeah, take layers. Our top advice is to take different layers because when the sun's shining, you're fine in a t-shirt, but then the kind of if you get wet or if you do get closer to a glacier, you definitely need that jacket on. We had backpacks all the time. So we had waterproofs and backpacks full of different clothes. So if somebody got wet, if somebody got cold, there was lots of stuff to try and help.
What about your experience on the cruise itself? What was your stay like?
We had the best time. So it was everything that we hoped it would be and more. So we were on board the Disney Wonder, one of the smaller Disney ships. And we love Disney Cruise Line. We've done quite a few. It was just
Hmm.
wonderful. There's so much to do. So there's so many activities put on. The swimming pools are fantastic. There's so much to do in terms of there's kids clubs as well. Our two children didn't want to go this time, so that's up to them. But I think a lot of children love the kids clubs on board. It was perfect. The service is fantastic. All the staff are wonderful and it makes it such a magical trip.
So you're saying that it's a smaller sort of cruise ship. Do you have an idea about like how many rooms or cabins they have?
Oh, I'm not sure. I would be able to Google and find out, but I think so. It's definitely there's at the moment Disney Cruise Line have five different ships, and there's two ships, the Magic and the Wonder, are the smallest ones. But I
Okay.
could guess, and I'd probably be way out, so I'm not sure. But compared to when I said we saw a Royal Caribbean ship in one of the ports, our ship was about half the size, much smaller.
What was your room like, the one that you had selected on Mondo?
So this is a kind of hotly debated thing about an Alaska cruise. So we'd had lots of people say to us that you can't go on an Alaska cruise and have an inside room because you won't see anything. The point of it is to see the stunning scenery. The price was double, so we went for an inside room, and because we couldn't justify, we try and get on as many different trips as we can, and we thought for the price difference between those two rooms, we could fit another trip in another holiday. So we chose an inside room. And actually, one of the kind of top tips I would give is don't rule out an inside room. So the room itself is lovely. It's great for a family of four. So there's a double bed and bunk beds for the children, lots of space, tons of storage. So for an inside room, we thought it was actually a really decent size. And it encouraged us to spend time out of our room. We were up on the decks in the swimming pool. We were on the top decks. We were walking around the promenade, which if you'd have had a veranda, if you'd have a balcony, you can only see one side depending on which way that balcony's facing. And if you're looking out and there's a message saying, oh, there's orcas the opposite side, you would have to go out anyway. We would do an inside room again and use the extra money that we'd saved on more trips or on different excursions.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. And that's so right that it only encouraged you to be out and about more.
It did definitely. Our trips were always quite busy, so we do a lot of things. We knew we were never going to be sat in the room anyway. It was just for sleeping on a night, so it worked perfectly.
What about meals on the cruise? What were they like?
On Disney Cruise Line, all of the food is included, even room service, all of the soft drinks are included as well. It was wonderful. So we At breakfast and lunch, you can use the buffet, which is called cabanas, or sit down restaurants, depending on what you prefer. We tended to go to the buffet because it suits all of us. I'm vegetarian, my husband is gluten-free. It works really well for everybody to pick what they want. There's then also around the swimming pool area, there's various different kind of what they call quick service restaurants. So you can grab like a burger, pizza, there's kebabs, there was a salad bar. So that's all included as well. And then on an evening, they do rotational dining on Disney. So there's 3 restaurants on board. And you visit all of those twice, one of them 3 times, and you keep the same servers. So by night 2, they know what you're going to order to drink, and they know what you want. So if you want sauce, if you want butter, if you want extra things, and it's there waiting for you. It's just wonderful. There's so much choice on the menus. There's a children's menu as well, but children don't have to pick from that. They can pick from the adult menu. If there's 2 things you want, just order both of them. It's vacation, treat yourself. We can't rave enough about the food on Disney Cruise Line.
Oh wow, that sounds really good, and especially that they have that attentive personal touch as well. That they're moving with you, so they know what you need. You don't have to like say it twice.
Yeah, it's wonderful. They know your names, they know the children. By the end of the trip, you feel like you're almost family with them. So it's always really sad to leave after a week. But yeah, it's just fantastic. And all things like the ice cream and is all free on board as well. So again, for a family, it helps with budgeting of the trip because things like that are included. You don't have to say no more, you've spent too much money on snacks today. So yeah, we find for us as a family, it works well and helps with budgeting for the trip as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you remember a dish or a meal that you guys really enjoyed on the cruise?
So both mine and my husband's favorite thing to have on Disney Cruise Line is the leek and potato soup. So it sounds really simple, but it's
Mhm.
absolutely delicious. The don't know what it is. I can't replicate it at home. I've tried, but the leek and potato soup is wonderful. My husband really enjoyed. So he had a lot of steaks, but I think with it being an Alaskan cruise, they did a lot of kind of regional variations and a lot of Alaskan dishes. So there was quite a lot of fish. So I know he had lobster one night and we enjoyed that. The children were probably really into the puddings and the desserts. So they had a lot of ice cream sundaes and things like that. So just, I don't think we had a bad dish on board, which was just meant there's too much to remember.
Oh wow, so everything was good food wise, and you
Very,
all
very
were
good.
pretty happy.
Yep.
Okay. Katie, if I ask you about like for someone who's about to visit Alaska or if they're about to take the same cruise that you did, what tips would you like to share with them?
So I think our kind of top tips is definitely explore the towns and get immersed in the culture. So I think obviously get off the ship. Some people don't necessarily get off at every port. Get off the ship. Don't miss any of the ports and try and book what you can. If you want to go whale watching or want to see bears, book that excursion. But most of those will be for half a day. So make sure that you don't waste the rest of the time. Get out in the towns, just explore. They're all so small, very walkable, and it's just the beauty on kind of every corner is fantastic. So yeah, explore the ports, get immersed in the culture. Book trips depending on what you want to see, book trips that work for your family, and make sure that you budget for these beforehand because some of them are quite expensive. So make sure you before you take this trip that you can afford to do everything that you want to. Days, so I think I've mentioned this so many times. So dress appropriately because again, they're quite long port days. So some mornings you could be getting off the ship at 8 a.m. and not back on until 7 p.m. So it's a long day. So make sure that you've covered every eventuality, that you've got a raincoat on, you've got layers in your backpack, and then you can really make the most of the day. When we were on the whale watching cruise, it can get windy. Even though the sun was shining, it was cooler. Make sure that you've got everything to keep you comfortable. So one thing that we thought was probably the best thing we did was to buy a zoom lens for our camera. So we've got a camera, it didn't have a zoom lens before, and we just bought a second-hand one before we went, and it was fantastic. So when we were seeing the whales and seeing the bears, we got wonderful photos to remember forever. So yeah,
Mhm.
make sure that you've got everything to capture those memories. And the last one, again, I've said this already, but don't assume you need a veranda or a balcony on a cruise. Don't let it put you off. So if the price is too much, we managed fine in an inside room and would do it again. You don't want to spend all your time in a room in Alaska anyway. You'll still see absolutely everything on board. There's so many cool spots. And even if the weather was bad, so we were really lucky that the weather was brilliant. But if the
Hmm.
weather was bad, there's so many spots that you could be indoors but still looking out. So yeah, don't rule it out, even if you've not got a veranda.
You've spoken about the layers a couple of times. I just want to what all would be the winter gear that one would have to carry if they're going in August?
So we probably overpacked it. We brought thermals, long trousers over that, waterproofs over that, and the same on the top half. We in August you don't need thermal base layers, so just so you can rule that out. But just make sure that waterproofs is probably the key one here. That you've got a jumper in case it does get a little bit cold, but that you've got waterproofs because once you get wet, and I think it does rain a lot in Alaska. Everybody jokes that it's always very wet, and it did in some of the parts in Ketchikan. It rained a lot of the day. Make sure you've got waterproofs because once you get wet, it can be a long day if you're cold and miserable.
That makes sense, yeah. And those are all really good tips and suggestions. I want to know, were you get any souvenirs from Alaska? Like, did you do any shopping?
We did. My daughter especially absolutely loves to shop, and all the ports had tons of different souvenir shops. So something that we do as a family, so we have a travel Christmas tree. So everywhere that we go, we try and make sure we've got a Christmas decoration to remember our trips. And we've been on so many at this point, we're definitely going to have to get a bigger Christmas tree next year to fit them all on. Yeah, so every port we at least got a Christmas decoration.
Oh,
But then
wow.
we had things like presents to bring back for people. We got some snacks, some of the local snacks. There's some sweets that were really recommended to us. It was different type of berry. I can't remember the name off the top. It had a strange name. Huckleberry, maybe huckleberry, something like that. But we tried some sweets because they were highly recommended, and lots of food items as well that Alaska was famous for. We did a fair bit of shopping.
The food items, especially, you can nibble on later on and then remember your trip.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. My last question for you is overall, like, how do you think back on your Alaska trip now? It's just been a couple of months, but what was the special about it?
It was everything we hoped it'd be and more. Looking back, the key things that stand out are the wildlife and gorgeous scenery. So every time you looked out the window, there was just mountains and the mist and the glaciers and waterfalls. One of the photos behind me, you can see one of the glaciers we could see there. It was just stunning. It was peaceful. It was so tranquil. It was just absolutely everything that we hoped it would be and more. It was a beautiful part of the world.
Sounds like a place one should definitely go and explore in their lifetime.
Definitely. Can't recommend it enough.
So, with that, I'm at the end of my questions. Thank you so much for joining me today, Katie. I'm sure the details you shared about your trip will be helpful for our viewers.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been wonderful to chat about our trip.
Yeah, with that, we will sign off for today. Bye bye and have a nice day.
Thank you, you too.